Maureen St. Germain, welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. I decided to have you speak at this program after I saw that you were one of the speakers on the Portal to Ascension recent. It wasn't a live conference. Obviously, there ain't no such thing as a live conference nowadays for obvious reasons. But at least Neil did give a video presentation for all his guests at the virtual conference, so to speak, to give. If you were at any other conferences of his or some other spiritual conference in the past, maybe I did see you live, but I've been to so many I can't remember everybody. Even though I do remember a lot, there's also a lot that I don't remember. So just a quick little disclaimer for the listeners and all that. I'm sure some of you are probably chomping at the bit to watch my interviews on YouTube again. As many of you know, I am going to require everybody, if they want to listen to my interviews right after I do them, to pay me using Patreon, which I will provide the links on to listen to the interviews, which I from now on will be listing as unlisted on YouTube for the first 2.5 to 3 weeks after I do the interview. After 3 weeks, it'll be live for everybody to watch on YouTube and also Cost.tv. And for that matter, after the videos do become live on YouTube, if you haven't listened to it yet, I'd rather folks please listen to the video on YouTube for only 15 seconds for the sake of giving me a view credit, and then click on the link in the video description, which I will provide for every interview, to watch the interview on Cost.tv, which is a monetization blockchain video channel. The more people who watch my videos on that channel, the more money I can make through blockchain. So that's what I prefer people do. There's always going to be a little bit of a delay between the YouTube upload and the Cost.tv upload. So if you don't see the Cost.tv description, Cost.tv link in the video description on YouTube, then, well, just listen on YouTube. But if it is on Cost.tv, folks, please only YouTube for 15 seconds for view credit, and then click on Cost.tv. And Cost.tv only allows 1 hour videos max. So I'm going to have to divide all these interviews that are 2 hours into 2 parts. So with that being said, Maureen St. Germain, for those that haven't heard about you, I think it's best, like I do with 97% of my guests, to please give your life story from a primary source perspective regarding what happened to you, what you witnessed, what you've researched, and what you saw and heard, and any other 5 senses or non-mainstream 5 senses that you've used to learn and discover the things that you've seen in your life up to this point that causes you to be the individual that you are and the things you do. So I don't have Alex Jones-itis. I do not interrupt my guests, so I'll put myself on mute. And you've got the floor, and then we'll get into some very serious subject matter after that. So you've got the floor, Maureen St. Germain, your life story.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you for having me. And welcome to all your guests. I'm delighted to be here. I'm known as the Practical Mystic because I was named that in a book that was called Wisconsin's Famous Mystics. And they named me as the Practical Mystic because what I do is teach people practical tools on how to make their life easier. And I dip into the esoteric to do that. And I merge my inner knowing with the esoteric and practical experience. I am a mom. I raised 4 sons who are now adults and have their own happy lives. I've always been connected to the mystical arts. When I was a child, I was crazy about this book my mom had called Lives of the Saints. I was raised Catholic. And when I couldn't find the book in the bookcase, I asked myself, where is that book? Because it was a thick book and it had gold leaf all over it. It was a beautiful book. And I saw a picture of where it was, and it was in a closet in another room. So I got a chair and climbed up, got the book out, put the chair back, and did whatever I was going to do as far as my reading. And then I put the book back where it belonged. And I assumed at the time that my mother didn't want me to damage the book and was worried about it. But she never hit it again after that. My mother was psychic as well. She knew where my father was in World War II when he was a captured prisoner. And so I think I have some of that in my blood. I worked in the corporate world for about 25, 30 years and began doing spiritual work before then. Initially, I was in the closet just doing study groups and things like that so that I wasn't attracting a lot of attention. And then little by little, I began to do more and more. And I began teaching the Merkaba the ancient 17 breath Merkaba. And that really pushed me into the forefront. And so a couple of years after I began teaching that, my schedule increased dramatically. And suddenly my boss, who knew all about my seminar work, decided he needed to find somebody else. But he gave me a decent exit package, and we parted on very good terms. And I began working full time in this field, and I have not stopped. So that was back in around 1995. My books are award-winning books that have been translated into about 15 languages. I've taught mysticism, sacred geometry, and ascension information since 1995. I'm part of the advanced crew to help you, individuals, with your ascension.
Thank you. Interesting life story. Short, sweet, and to the point. I like that. So more talking time for the other things. And those other things, I guess you might as well start big with sacred geometry. And I'm looking at your YouTube channel here, and I've set the videos most popular to least popular to make sure that the most popular, which are more than likely the most significant subjects, are the ones we discuss first. Your most popular video is one where a whale almost gives a high five. I'm sure that's interesting to watch, but nothing really to talk about there. The next,
Yeah, wait, there is, because
okay, all right.
we had an experience in meditation where the whale came in and talked to one of the members of my group. And so then this whale came, and another member of the group called out loud, "Hey, how about giving us a high five?" And the whale literally swam towards the boat. We all were going, "Oh my God, what's going to happen?" Put his fin up, touched everyone in the boat who had their hand out, and then went down, missed the boat. It was pretty intense and pretty cool.
What kind of whale was it?
A sperm whale.
Really? I thought sperm whales.
I mean, wait. The whales that are in Hawaii for let me think about this for a minute. They're long and gray and not a sperm whale. I'll have to think about it. I'll tell you the name.
It's cool. I don't know. Sperm whales aren't necessarily cool with humans. Just read Moby Dick and you'll learn all about that. But anyhow, next popular video: Be a Genie Manifesting with Sacred Geometry. All right, this presentation video, almost 90 minutes long. But I'm sure the information is very significant, and considering that what remains of the system of domination and control on planet Earth, and yeah, it's not completely gone, even though a lot of it has been taken out. Probably many people would say the Vatican is the most powerful thing within the system of domination and control. No, it's not the Vatican. It's actually the sacred geometry, which has been twisted to be used for malevolent purposes. The sacred geometry grid that has been twisted, used for malevolent purposes. But sacred geometry, I'm sure naturally, is not supposed to be malevolent, because infinite love is the only truth, and everything else is illusion. So sacred geometry, there are so many different shapes and sizes for that matter. And I guess one question, among others, is, does size matter? I mean, a image of the flower of life that's an inch in diameter, is that going to be just as powerful, just as good as a flower of life image that's 8 yards in diameter or something? They say size sometimes does matter with crystals, so is the same true with sacred?
Actually, with crystals and with an image, size does not matter.
How can you confirm that?
What matters is that you have a clear image. So go for the clear images, go for the ones that you can see. If you like them big, blow them up, but make sure it doesn't get distorted. So, but there's way more to sacred geometry than just looking at images. The way I teach sacred geometry is I teach people about the Fibonacci sequence first, which is the sequence built upon itself. So 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, like that. And then the sequence, when it gets up to after 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, like that, those higher pairs produce the golden mean, which is also known as phi. And the golden mean is found in the Great Pyramid. It's found in the Parthenon. It's found in practically any piece of art that is popular, whether it's an old popular or a new popular. It's found on the face of humans. It's found on the relationship between the little finger and the wrist. So this relationship called phi is easily understood when you begin to think back to when you learned, maybe in 5th grade, about pi, Pi. And pi is this relationship between a circle and its radius, or a circle and its circumference. So that number 3.14, or pi, is an irrational number. We were taught that. We were taught that if we were to write it as a number, we would put dot, dot, dot. So it's really not a number. It's a relationship. And that's really the most important thing to understand. That relationship exists whether the circle is small or large. It's the same relationship. So it's a constant. Even though the circle may change size, the constant that shows that relationship is always the same. And the same is true in the physical body with phi. All the phi relationships are the same. So think of a nautilus shell and look at your own design on your Skype ID. You actually have that shape. And that shape is the same proportion going inward and outward. And that's the same proportion that's found in the DNA spiral and so on. So one of the things that I do is I teach people how to create that relationship called phi by taking any two numbers and adding them together, just like the Fibonacci sequence. And what's interesting is a lot of people don't know this. I call this the Phoenix sequence. And the Phoenix sequence actually produces phi on the 9th and 10th iteration of any two numbers that are added together in a circle. So whether you start with 3 and 6, and then the next number would be 9, and then the next number would be 15, and then the next number would be 24, like that, what happens is when you get to the 9th and 10th addition, those two numbers as a pair divided into each other will always produce 1.618. So what I'm teaching people in the sacred geometry is to understand and recognize that it's everywhere, and that they can see it in their bodies, they can see it in nature, and they can see it in the way plants grow. And what that does is helps them understand when I say phi, or the golden mean, the same thing, our source code. And source code is the matrix. So if you know that, and you have two numbers that are not paired together in that same way to produce, well, let me start it over. If you take any two numbers and pair them, and then keep adding, leapfrogging over each other, you're always going to produce phi in the 9th and 10th iteration. What's important to understand is that anywhere you are in the reality, you can pair with a version of the future that's after your outcome. When we try to manifest from where we're at to where we want to be, it's always, I'll use the word, a wannabe. I want to be in that castle. I want to have that car. And so the energy is always just before it, because you're pairing those two ideas. I'm here without a car. I'm here with a car. If you pair yourself visually, and there's more to it than that, if you pair yourself with where you're at, I don't have a car, and I've been seen driving my new car, what happens is the middle thing, you getting the car, which is produced by phi, happens with grace and ease. And the way you anchor it in is to use awareness of what I teach people about the dimensions. Third dimension is always right here, right now. It's the real-time conversation we're having. And so the real-time conversation is the thing that anchors a idea from being seen in a car to a real-time conversation. Somebody who knows you drive up to the grocery store and they notice you, and then they look at their car and they say, are you driving a rental? Did your car break down again? And you can say, no, that's my new car. And that conversation anchors it into your body. That allows you to attract it. Now, when a person has that conversation with themselves, hearing some likely person to have said it, that moves them into a zone of relaxing into it and having the emotion anchor it in. And then you move to joy because it's fun. And if you want to play, I'll do it with you and show you how it works. You'd have to name something that you really would like to achieve, and it can be mental, spiritual, physical, whatever you want to achieve, and just name it. The only thing I know it doesn't work with is bringing somebody back from the dead.
Interesting. I believe you thought of this video, Be a Genie. I believe that the genie from the Aladdin universe said one thing genies can't do is bring people back from the dead. So maybe there is some real life metaphysical truth to that in regards to powers that people are not supposed to have or entities are not supposed to have. But anyhow, regarding, let's stick with sacred geometry for a little bit. There is an individual lover, hater, Lily Earthling Kosalova. I had her as a guest on my show. She's talked about sacred geometry among many other things. She has said that the Merkaba and the yin yang symbol, it is not in our best interest to use them because they carry a frequency of duality. And she asserts that in order to get out of this 3D matrix, we have to focus on unity consciousness and not duality. The problem with her is she's become so polarized from her obsession with unity consciousness that she loves to attack almost anybody who does not agree with her. And I haven't unfriended her or banned her from any of my social media, but there are some people that have. You know who you are if you're listening to this. But Lily isn't really the point here. The point is whether she is generally right in asserting that it is not in our best interest to use the yin yang and the Merkaba because they are duality. It's better to stick with unity, consciousness, geometry.
Well, I'd like to speak to that if I may.
Yes, please.
First of all, there is some truth to what she's saying, but the minute you become, I'll use the word defiant or defensive, you've dropped back into polarity yourself. So your point is well taken. The Merkaba will actually bounce you into 5D, but it's up to a person. And by the way, 5D is the same as unity consciousness for our purposes here. So the Merkaba actually pushes you into 5D. It's what I call the Ascension uniform or the uniform of 5D. So when you're wearing an activated Merkaba, you've turned it on, then your energy is uplifted to the point that you rise above the masses in terms of your energy field. What that does for you is makes you like a grown-up with your hand on the head of a little kid who's swinging at you. You don't feel it. You notice it. You can see it. You might find it amusing, but it doesn't affect you. And so I have found, and I worked with the Merkaba since 1995, and I taught over 10,000 students the original 17-breath Merkaba. And I have found that it actually elevates a person to be their non-polarity self faster than anything else in the world. And the proof I have is that a number of times the men who have taken my class, who are very interested in the geometry and the mechanics of it, and they pick me as a teacher because that's how I like to teach, their wives call me 6 weeks later and they say, I've never seen a change in my husband like I've seen since he's been doing the Merkaba. He is so much more loving. He's so much more heart-centered. And this happened 3 or 4 times in a cycle of time that I knew I was supposed to pay attention to that and remember that that is a truth, that it changes you. It opens your heart. And the reason it works to open your heart is because we use the tools within the 5D Merkaba to access the heart. And then the field of the Merkaba is impenetrable. So then you become like Neo in the first Matrix movie, where the stuff comes in, but he's dodging it. And you can see from the look on his face, wow, I didn't know I could do that. Wow, I couldn't. And so you don't even take offense. You know, it's like having a family member insult you and looking at them and saying, gosh, that was so sweet of you. Thank you. And to only hear the love that was behind it. And secondly, the yin yang single is perfectly balanced. If you focused on one side of it or the other, that would be different. That would change the reality and pull you into polarity. But in 5D, you're actually able to observe both sides of that and have ambivalence, have care and concern, but not to care about sides, to not take a side.
Thank you for clarifying all that. Now, regarding becoming fifth dimensional, and that's actually the name of your fourth most popular video on your YouTube channel, Becoming Fifth Dimensional, an introduction. It's also about an hour and a half long. Now, what's regarding 3D versus 4D versus 5D? A couple of dates to point out. Jim Self has pointed out that the Mayan calendar end date of December 21st, 2012, the significance of that date was that we that officially moved us all to the fourth dimension, even though we see the world as three-dimensional, because that's basically what we're so accustomed to. Good analogy is you see with both eyes open in 3D. If you close one eye, you see in 2D, but you would think, well, it looks the same as it did with two eyes open, even though it's 2D. That's because you're so you already have a mental image of what everything looks like, so it doesn't really look much different than 3D does. It's kind of the same analogy for how we've turned into 4D on this earth, even though it appears to be 3D after 2012. Well,
I'd like to stop you and say a
Okay.
couple of things here. Number one, I don't believe that we're going into fourth dimension. I believe we're going right into fifth, and that fourth dimension is a place of transition. So I really like Jim Self, although I've not studied with him or anything like that. Many of my students have studied him and have given me excellent reports. What I will say to you is I see fourth dimension as a portal. So it's like going to Grand Central Station or an airport terminal. You go there to get somewhere else. You do not go there to spend the night. Nobody deliberately spends the night at an airport or a bus terminal. They choose to use that as a way to get where they want to go. And fourth dimension in my world is the vibrational data set of the astral plane and the emotions. There is still polarity there. There's still a high matrix of fourth dimension and a low matrix of fourth dimension. So if you're in a crying jag or you're whining or you're in a pity party, that'll pull you down even further. If you're in a joyful place and uplifting, it makes it easier to slide into fifth dimension. And that's where we're all going. And by the way, in fifth dimension, it is my assertion that we're all becoming fifth dimensional. And oh, by the way, we're doing it incrementally at a time. That means that some moments you're in 5D, and then you slide back to your old patterns, and then you go back up to 5D, and then you slide into your old patterns. But that sine wave of going up and down is at an angle. So you're always making progress, even if you are still slipping into a lower dimension. You're still reaching higher and higher. And you'll get to the point where you can stay in 5D all the time. You know, it's a little bit like being a parent. When I told my mother how proud I was of one of my sons, and he had been the trouble one, and I was so pleased that he had done something very mature. And my mother said to me, well, honey, you know, kids don't grow up in a straight line. And I was so shocked at what she said. I said, what does that mean? And she said, well, it means usually when they do something mature, they follow it with something stupid. And that's us. We do something very spiritual, and then we slide down and do something stupid. Then we slide back up, and pretty soon we get the hang of staying in 5D, and that's where we land.
Interesting perspective. Oh, and you say people don't sleep at airports. Actually, I did. When my flight got canceled, I decided, screw paying for a hotel. I'm sacrificing luxury and convenience and comfort.
But wait a minute. You did not choose to do that when you made your plan to travel.
Yeah, of course not. But
That's my point.
Yes.
You might get stuck there, just like people get stuck in the astral plane. It happens, but it's not a choice you choose when you make the plan to go somewhere. And my point is, a person can get stuck in 4D, especially in the dream time, instead of elevating themselves to 60. But there are ways to get around that. And in your case, it makes total sense to do that because it was a late cancellation and it just felt like it was easier just to stay where you were. That makes sense. But I use that as a metaphor so people will get the picture, not to explain away why you chose to sleep in an airport.
I probably should have figured that out. Anyhow, we also had another very significant winter solstice relative to other winter solstices just past us not that long ago, and so many people were obsessing about this winter solstice. Uh, well, first of all, because it was a winter solstice on steroids relative to the one in 2012, based on consciousness rising, and also it had a little something else to it. The whole Jupiter and Saturn coming together to start what some think was a starting point for the age of Aquarius. There's so many different starting points for the age of Aquarius. There's no definitive answer, but it could be viewed as one anyway because of that reason alone. So, but this seemed to be of a fifth dimensional perspective. It seemed I don't know if I heard anybody talking about this past winter solstice, mentioning anything about fourth dimensional things, in contrast to 2012 when Jim Self said that's where everybody will be from now on. He said fourth dimension, not fifth dimension. Um, so do you, if I were to ask you the question, what happened this past winter solstice? Don't tell me that Jupiter and Saturn lined up. Yes, I know that, but I'm talking about from a consciousness rising perspective and an ascension perspective, what happened?
Um, First of all, I'm not an astrologer, so I'm probably not the qualified person to talk about that. I can tell you that I, like you, have followed some of the comments and information from astrologers. And what one astrologer said, so it's not my thinking, it's what somebody else said, is that even though there have been many labels to say this was the beginning, because of this particular conjunction and square, it was a very clear indication that if it had not yet started, this is it. This is the starting point. And from my perspective, I look at astrology as an overlay. I like astrology. I follow timing of astrology. But at the same time, I believe we humans have the ability to rise outside of that template. So imagine, if you will, everybody on Earth doesn't know, doesn't have any challenges, doesn't have anything that's going on, and the astrology causes them to move in certain ways or to react in certain ways. And then that combined with their own birth astrology and astrology overhead, blah, 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 creates a matrix for them to work out their life. But at any given time, a person could consciously choose to step out of that with some certain tools that I don't teach here on the radio, but I teach in other environments. So I want to make it clear that although I like astrology and I believe in astrology, I also believe we can step outside of it, and I have.
Well, I used to be the same myself, up until about maybe 2015. I was always just live my life to the fullest. Don't try to confuse yourself by looking at horoscopes. The stars will guide you if your intention is to live life to the fullest. You really
Wait
can't
a
go
minute.
wrong.
I don't say that I um, don't follow astrology. I look at astrology like a GPS. If the bridge is out and the GPS tells you the bridge is out, you can go try and cross the bridge and you can wait for days till they fix it. But the astrology is like a GPS and tells you what's going to work and what won't. Once you know that something is out of alignment or out of whack or a problem for most folks, you step out of that by consciously choosing to be aware of it and then choosing another outcome. That's different than just listening to astrology and following it or blowing it off, because I don't blow it off. That's why I said I really like astrology and I follow astrology, but I also use it proactively.
I use it proactively too now. That did all change after that, and I think it's a worthwhile map, as is numerology, for leading, going about a day or a month or any year cycle or whatever, how long a time period into a horoscope you want to look. Um, but let's switch gears now. I try to cover with my shows. It's usually many subjects on the fly rather than one or two subjects in great detail. So that's probably, but you probably could have figured that out by now. Next subject, how to clear entities remotely. My good friend Daniel Teague, who seems to have been a little quiet recently in terms of business, well, so is everybody else, but he loves this area. This is what he does. He had a car accident that put him in a near-death experience where he came back learning how to clear out negative entities and energies and cut cords and do things that archangels could do, just by temporarily entering the spirit realm and then coming back into this when he's done. He can clear negative energies and entities out of places if you give him the address. He claims he doesn't actually need the address. He claims he can if tap into one's personal consciousness, what their home idea of home is, and then scan for negative entities or energies and clear them out. He can also close portals, among other things. But these entities that you're talking about clearing remotely, is that probably what he's doing, or are we talking about something different here?
We're talking about the same thing.
Okay.
And what I do on that video is teach people how to do the clearing work for themselves. I believe very strongly in people like your friend Daniel, because some people are meant to do this work. And it's so interesting to me because I have a team of people that work within my organization that do clearing work for our clients. And out of 4 people, 3 of them are men. So I think it's interesting. It's almost like that job is a job for the fearless. And, it's a heavy duty job. I used to do clearing entities myself, but I decided I needed to focus more on teaching people. So I like the fact that you have a friend that does this work and likes to do it. And I hope he is well provided for.
Yeah, although you'll be surprised, there are some people who don't really relish the idea of doing healings to people and their property behind their back without telling him. Daniel says that very often a lot of things he does are in secret. It's not uncommon for someone to tell him something like, many years ago, I stole money out of my mother's pocketbook and I feel bad and I don't want to get rid of the karma that I caused from stealing my mother. So can I ask you to do a full-blown chakra healing on my mother for Mother's Day or as a gift to make up for the karma of the bad things I did to her, and I'll pay you for it? He can do that without asking for permission. And
I'd like to speak to that if I can. Okay, so I don't know about the chakra clearing, but what I can tell you is it is not required for permission to clear entities because the entities have been outlawed. They are no longer allowed in the reality. And that's why nobody who does clearing work needs permission. So if you were let's say you were involved in a relationship and it wasn't going well, but you really love this person and you wanted it to work, but you felt like there was something amiss that was new and different, but an amiss. You could ask for a clearing of her or him and then ask for that to be done remotely without the person knowing about it, because it supports them and it supports the reality we all live in. Secondly, most of the people who ask for a clearing of a family member or a friend are affected by that negative entity in the first place. So that's reason alone to clear that entity or energy out. And finally, I don't know about you, but occasionally I go faster than the speed limit. Why do I do that? Because I can, because there's no one stopping me. I haven't lost my license for speeding. If, however, we had a zero tolerance, which we do about entities, and we get pulled over for speeding with zero tolerance, we would lose our car and our license. So there is zero tolerance for any dark entities that don't belong here, that aren't from here, don't belong to us, beings without a body. They've lost their chance to be on Earth. They've lost their chance to participate in this reality. Sometimes they stick around because they don't know they're dead. Sometimes they stick around because they've got agendas. So those energies, whether you want to call them, bodies or entities or whatever you want to call them, they do not have a right to be here. And they are no different than you or I calling the police on a neighbor that drives too fast on the street where all the kids play all the time. You would do it if you stopped them and said, look, you can't do that, and they keep doing it, then you'd go back and you'd call the police and say, look, we got a problem here. We need to fix it. And so that's what someone like Daniel is doing. They are simply clearing the field because we are allowed to have a clear field. And oh, by the way, that's playing out in the physical reality as well.
Right. And I can't resist asking about this now since you brought it up. Acting out your own personal sovereignty in the face of danger and force. Now you said you haven't gotten pulled over for going over the speed limit. Well, it might interest you to know that traffic laws and driver's licensing, car insurance, and registration laws actually only apply to commercial drivers. If you think that's a joke, there's a video called "What the Government Doesn't Want You to Know About Your Driver's License" that was
Well,
uploaded in 20.
you know what? You're a smart guy, and I agree with you that that is so. However, there are lots of things in place right now that are, what's the word I want? Causing conformity. And hopefully those things are being removed. That's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, but the issue is there's a great many people in this world that are too complicit or too cowardly to stand up in the face of a government official who is infringing on their rights in an unlawful manner. And
Well,
is that a
I will say to you that while that is true to some degree, I think people are getting stronger. I think this time in our homes has made everyone a little stronger. And I also want to point out that the metaphors I use are not to be taken literally as much as they are to help people understand. So,
mm,
you know, I think everything you said is valid and important. But I'm also convinced that the people that are listening to your show aren't those people that are afraid.
well, I hope they wouldn't be. I've stood up for myself in front of an officer who pulled me over. Didn't work out too well in terms of what he did to me. Not going to get into details. It ain't pretty, but I'm not going to let that stop me from doing it all over again if it happens again. And well, all right, enough about me. Let's move on to some other subjects here. All right, quick out of left field subject. Um, I saw in your bio something about dragons, like you have personal connections with dragons. Now, I don't know if I should or shouldn't have a connection with dragons, and the reason I say that, I've been doing a lot of Feng Shui recently, but one little Feng Shui object that I have not bought is the little dragon figurine, and the reason I haven't, and I'm reluctant to do it to some degree, is because in one of the sources on Feng Shui that I actually read that tiger signs in the Chinese zodiac, such as I'm a fire tiger, would not resonate very well with dragons, and that, including that little dragon Feng Shui figurine. And now I do actually have two shirts in my wardrobe from my Aikido dojo that have images of dragons on them, and I like to wear those, and I don't think they've caused me problems or anything. But I mean, I also to some degree feel that it is possible, of course it's possible, anything's possible to work in harmony, a tiger sign to work in harmony with those little dragon Feng Shui figurines so they don't cause the problems that can result from dragons and tigers not resonating with each other. But aside from that, and what should someone in my position, what's the best way to look at this? And for that matter, why don't you tell us what exactly dragons are? I could go into what Andrew Bartzis has said about it, another Akashic Records creator, but I'm not supposed to be talking too much. I'm supposed to give you the chance to talk. So
You're
go
a
right ahead.
sweetheart. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a big affinity for dragons that came in when I saw them, and they came to me and they said they were back in the reality. So dragons have returned to this reality. They were chased out by the church. I have a picture in my book on the Waking Up in 5D, where I talk about the dragons and I explain that they are elemental beings, but they are free will elemental beings. The other elementals do not have free will, and the chapter on dragons is points out that even the Catholic Church had dragons in their iconography, and they had them in their chapels and in other places. And what was done is a perversion to make people afraid of dragons. Fortunately, the Eastern traditions of the Orient have always revered dragons as powerful beings. Now, the dragons are useful for a couple of primary things. They're useful for clarity, and they're also useful for helping you find your way or to get something done. So one time for example, when we were in heavy traffic and we were on a surface road and the freeway next to us was at a standstill and the traffic in front of us was at a standstill. And it was one of those city blocks where there were probably 10 traffic lights all in front of us. And my husband turned to me and said, can you call in the dragons? This is impossible. And I called in the dragons for both the freeway and for ourselves. And then all the lights turned green and stayed green for 10 miles. It was an unbelievable experience. And when we finished that length of road and went back on the freeway where it was moving now, my husband turned to me and he said, I've driven this road so many times and I've never not been stopped by at least one light. So the dragons will help you in traffic. So whenever you're caught in difficult traffic, you can say, I'm asking the dragons to help me and everyone around me get where they need to go and on time and in plenty of time, or I'm just asking the dragons for help. So that's one thing that's very tangible. And you don't have to take my word for it. All you have to do is try it. And it's so interesting because today I put on a jade dragon in my jewelry. Secondly, the dragons are really good for clarity. So let's say you hear two conflicting pieces of information and it's starting to create cognitive dissonance. How can this be true if this is true? And if this is true, how can this be true? And you go back and forth trying to, wrap your brain around something. And the way to solve it is to say to the dragons, look, I really need some clarity on this, and then let it go. And suddenly you'll get this aha and you'll see how everything fits. So that's the second thing that dragons are good for. Finally, when you refer to Feng Shui, I am a big fan of Feng Shui, and I used to be a Feng Shui expert, but one more thing that I let it go to make room for the more spiritual stuff. And I do think Feng Shui is very spiritual. I will say that whatever you have read online is probably the tip of the iceberg. And if you were to read from a library book or from a book that you buy, you may find out more. I have a feeling that the caution is that if fire tigers and dragons don't work together, then if you're going to use a dragon for a cure, it wouldn't work as well for you as it would for me. If you know that you need a cure for a certain spot, there are other cures besides a dragon to heal that spot or to fix that spot. And so that's what I would say to you as far as that goes. And a Feng Shui expert, of course, can tell you that. I do have one of those on my website. So if you need a Feng Shui expert, you can call Peg.
Thank you. And you have also a lifelong interest in the Akashic Records, and you have access to it. You've actually founded Akashic Records International. So my number one source of information on this show by far has probably been Akashic Records reader Andrew Bartzis. And my argument for why I would use him as the number one source, if he were to say a specific thing about a subject that I'm talking about, is because the Akashic Records, the ability to access them and see them, is probably the best way, in my mind, to get the definitive answer on almost any question. Bartzis has taken a humble perspective on this and asserted that there are people in this world who can access the Akashic Records better than he can, but they're too cowardly to come forward because they have a fear of what other people think. And although I think maybe he's lying there, just trying to be humble, because I cannot believe for one moment that someone who's been chosen to be a galactic historian, as he has, would not have perhaps the best Akashic reading ability of anybody in the world. And I'm also thinking, okay, well, isn't like the Akashic Records, no matter how you slice it, you can look at a different part of it at any given moment, but in the end, it's kind of, would any given Akashic Records reader who wants to read some part of the Akashic Records see it any differently than any other Akashic Records reader who attempted to read the same thing, if you understand what I'm trying to say?
I do, and that's a really good question. So first of all, anybody who goes calling out people and making them bad or labeling them in a way that appears to be a pejorative, it doesn't resonate with me at all. So I can't speak to that. But what I can tell you is that I could tell you I'm going to the internet and looking something up, and you could go to the internet and look something up, and they might be two different sets of information. They might even be conflicting. So what I will say to you is that the skill of opening the Akashic Records is a direct correlation to the person opening it and the method they use to open. So rather than say, that's one issue. Then the second issue is, if you were an Akashic Records guide and you wanted to read someone, and then they came to me for another reading, their records have already changed because you have influenced them with the information that you are giving. And I'm a little concerned about using it as a definitive source for everything, because in our lineage, we only use it for soul growth. So we don't try to predict the future from the Akashic Records. Certainly, I get plenty of information that I feel is advanced information, but I don't necessarily label that as an Akashic Records piece of information, because the Akashic Records are living. It's a living field. It's like standing in the ocean. Everything is moving. Everything is moving. And the reason everything is moving is because your thoughts are different than mine. I'm going to affect the situation. You're going to affect the situation. And all these different layers, people, situations, circumstances, color whatever a person is seeing. So even if you and I were identical, let's say we're identical twins, we had this same capacity, the reading that is done after your reading will never be the same, because that client has changed from listening to what your evocative wisdom that's coming through the Akashic Records is giving them. So, and secondly, we teach people how to go into fifth dimensional zone first. So we launch from a place of non-duality. And that place of launching from non-duality allows the record keepers, the people that I train, to present information in a non-biased way. You know, if you have a strong belief system about something that you think is wrong, and somebody comes and says, this is what I've done, and I want to do this now, if you already have a bias against that first part, it might impact the reading you give. So we do a lot of spiritual work, and we feel very strongly that anybody who's opening the Akashic Records, whether they're opening it from learning from a book like the one I wrote, or taking a class from me or someone else, to pay attention to their energy. And one of the things that I require people to do is to do a check-in with their guidance to find out if it's okay to go in the records today. Because sometimes you're too tired, or sometimes you have just had a big blow-up argument with someone, and your energy is not compatible with that kind of thing. Or maybe you've been doing drugs and there's holes in your aura. So opening the records would also then allow other junk to come in, and you wouldn't be able to filter it apart.
Thank you for pointing that out. All right, last thing you said there, you take drugs and there's holes in your aura. Okay, well, are you talking about the hard drugs like cocaine and alcohol and heroin, or are you also talking about the psychedelic ones that people use to enhance spiritual work and shamanic ritual? And are you okay, I'm asking a lot of questions here, but I'll keep it just to these two questions here. Which kinds are you talking about? And also, as a species, is it in our best interest to try to learn how to get high on sobriety, because getting high off other things to get through life is a hindrance to consciousness expansion, even though it may seem like you're rising consciousness at a time you take like a psychedelic. In the end, it's actually the wrong way to go regarding discovering your infinite potential, some might assert. So is it good to get high on sobriety? Is that something we should try to strive to do?
Okay, so first let's clarify holes in your aura. I was talking about both. When you're on a shamanic journey and you're doing ayahuasca and you have shamans working with you, clearing the field and making sure that when everything opens up, you go straight to Mother Ayahuasca and you have an experience with her, that is totally wholesome. I don't have any interest in doing it myself, but many people that I have worked with have done it and have found it beneficial. Some people don't get anywhere with it, and all they do is throw up. So I personally feel, for me or for people that ask my opinion, of course, I would always check in and ask, is this a good plan for them? I have had students in my class that have been on other kinds of drugs, acid, meth, other kinds of addictive drugs. and they have seen the Merkaba around themselves or their friends. And that drove them to become sober and to learn the sacred geometry. So we have to look at it from a much bigger picture and say the easiest way to get your spiritual groove is to do the spiritual work. Some people don't believe in it or they don't know it exists. And then they get exposed to it through these extreme methods, which I don't recommend. But they do have a certain experience. And remember, the gateways are open no matter what it is you're taking that is changing the mechanism of your normal body functions. And that does include alcohol. Now, when you have alcohol, your glass of wine, a couple of beers, your body repairs those holes in your aura within 24, 48 hours. That's another reason why I tell my students, ask if it's okay, because sometimes you forget that you had a glass of wine yesterday, and your guidance will tell you, no, don't you remember you had a glass of wine yesterday? And so then you wait till your body has healed the rest of your aura, because you want a clear channel. Think of it like a tube, and you don't want any interference. And that's the way you maintain it. So the body does repair. But of course, the more extreme you get, the bigger hole you blow open, the tougher it's going to be. You know, there are people who take ayahuasca who are a mess because they didn't have the shamans working with them, and the dark energies just, had their way with them, and it was terrible. So I was talking about all kinds of interfering ingestibles. And I will also say that you can get just as high from meditation. You know, there's a famous story. Timothy Leary, who was also known as who worked with Ram Dass, the professor from Cornell, and Ram Dass gave his teacher, the spiritual guru that he studied with in India, an illegal drug to show him how wonderful it was. And after the teacher took it and had the experience, he said to Ram Dass, "Actually, I didn't feel anything. I prefer meditation."
Interesting little story there. And excuse me, since we're talking about that, I actually just lit up a pipe of Mapacho tobacco. Sorry, some of the nicotine seemed to have gotten in my throat. I don't inhale the stuff. I only drag it in my mouth, which is like pipes and cigars are meant to be smoked, inhaled into your lungs. That's the quickest way to become addicted. But I find this, and Akashic Records International Bartsis has said that smoking tobacco while doing radio and also sessions helps them communicate a complex message easier, and it also seems to do a good job of clearing things out. And I have can't help but wonder, all this criticism that we've heard since elementary school about secondhand smoke being harmful. I can certainly believe that with the commercial cigarettes that have so much garbage in them, it's ridiculous. But I fear pure organic tobacco that's used to make genuine fresh cigars and pipe tobacco. I have no doubt that secondhand smoke, all that conspiracies that we've heard about how it's harmful and all, it's a lie. There's a conspiracy there to cover up the fact that secondhand smoke, for all intents and purposes, is as good as incense for cleaning out negative energy. In fact, the mapacho that I buy from shamandealer.com, which comes from the Amazon, the package it comes in is actually labeled Amazonian incense, not not mapacho tobacco as it is. So, do you using tobacco as a incense, and do you think secondhand smoke really isn't harmful? That's just a cut. They just don't want you to believe that because they don't want people using it as an energy clear and a positivity enhancer, if you will. Any comments on that?
I think that you know more about this subject than I do. What I do know is that there are certain people who benefit from smoking, and they are a certain vibration that smoking is a match for them. But most everybody else can be affected adversely. But again, I think you know more about this than I do.
Fair enough. So, um, what subjects can we talk about next? All right, higher self. And also lower self. There's a popular video you did about 9 years ago, a series of videos actually, several parts, higher self, and one of them is lower self. And you never hear that phrase, lower self, but one could say that there are lower self versions of you, like you see in the cartoons, the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder. The angel can be thought of as a higher self version of you, trying to make sure your life goes in a positive way, while the devil is a lower self version of you that wants to lead you the wrong way.
I like
So,
your analogy, but it is not a match for what I was describing in those
okay,
videos.
all right,
It's a fun example, but the lower self is the part of you that is trying to keep you safe. It's the part of you that's maybe got the inner child, the desire body, and the aspects of you that are just trying to get along in life. So the lower self is the one that's going to choose, let's say, cookies instead of vegetables at mealtime. And so we look at the lower self as part of a growing up. It's part of who we are and how we keep ourselves safe. And the lower self also reads the field. So when you go into a room and there's hostility going on, you can feel it. When you visit, like a place where war has occurred, people who are sensitive, they feel it. That's all coming from their lower self. So the lower self can be giving you good information that you need. If you have a feeling in the pit of your stomach, as someone new that you're meeting, you're going to like exit quickly and get away from that person because you realize that they're causing you to feel that way. So that's all lower self information and lower self help. But the lower self is like a child. When you look at a comparison, again, this is a metaphor. So the child doesn't know the best that can be known, doesn't have the research or the knowledge or the resources. The higher self has not only your own resources, but it has the resources in the reality that you care the most about. I wrote a blog post about this in November, and I would highly recommend anybody who wants to follow this a little bit further to take a look at it, because I describe how your lower self might want one thing and your higher self wants something else. And I'll just cut to the chase on this, but I'd love to have people have a chance to really get the big picture. And that was, I was coming home from a trip that I had been teaching for 3 weeks in China. And my husband and I agreed that we were going to drive from San Diego to LA to the museum to see a performance of a friend of mine at the LACMA, Los Angeles Museum of Art. And the plan, I thought, was to leave around noon and have a leisurely breakfast and then drive to LA and then have dinner and then have the concert. But my husband had this brilliant idea to go to another museum, since we weren't going to be needed at the other museum until later. This brand new museum had opened up, and he thought we should go. And I said to him, "That's a terrible idea. I don't like that idea. Can't you realize that I'll be flying for 15 hours, and I might not feel like doing that?" And then I said, "But I'll check in with my higher self." And my higher self said to go. And out of that, I got 2 fabulous friends, 2 fabulous assistants that worked for me for a total of 5 years. I also met a woman in line who looked at me after talking for a few minutes, and I said their last name because they handed me the ticket. They said, "You need to hold on to this in case we get separated." This woman had invited me to join this group because she had an extra ticket. And I said their name out loud, and the older woman that was the grandmother to this family looked at me and said, "Are you Maureen?" It turns out that woman was my mother's best friend for 30 years. And last time she had seen me was like 30 years earlier at my first wedding.
thank you. So that's a little take there on higher selves and what the difference between higher self and lower self is. But what about future selves? There's stories of future selves interacting with people in far-fetched ways if their life is taking a turn for the worse and the future self wants to get them back on track. They may show up and they give him a nice kick in the pants with some pretty freaky stuff. I know that because I seem to have an experience with that way back in the day, and when I had a chance to have a session with Andrew Bartzis not that long ago, he told me that your future self was trying to give you a kick in the pants when you had all those visions and all those synchronicities were happening around you at the same time in your room with like beepers and phones going off and whatnot. I'm not going to get too much into what happened, but you get the idea. Apparently, future selves have the ability to go back in time to meet you and confront you and tell you, get your shit straight or you're going to be in deep shit. So, any comments on that?
Well, I have a very interesting relationship with time, and I believe that time is a construct and that we can adjust time, expand it, and collapse it. And I've had a lot of experiences like that. Now, I wouldn't label those experiences as being part of your future self coming in and talking to you, but Andrew has what he has as his message. So I don't know what to say to you, but I do use my future self to get knowledge. So I teach people how to connect with the future self and bring back knowledge that your future self has that you don't have, and also with your past self, because we don't always bring in all the skills that we've acquired in all the lives that we've had. And if there's a skill that we're leaning into, but we want to get mastery quickly, we can attract the energy of the past self, for example, and bring it in. And the same is true with the future self. So I think it's an interesting label that he described your experiences, but without knowing more, I wouldn't be able to comment on that. Yeah, it's an interesting thought. Back to the Future, some of those movies kind of play on that theme. So there's probably something to it.
Right. Well, just like there had to be something to Back to the Future. I've never actually seen any of the movies in their entirety, but I know of them enough because they were so ingrained in my pop culture growing up. And also, nobody at the time knew that it's not an accident that the antagonist Biff Tannen resembled Donald Trump, and there was a line about the Chicago Cubs winning the 2016 World Series in that movie. It's almost as if government time travel forces communicated with the people who made that movie. I think they did. That's another subject. So entirely. So let's move on to something else here. You actually have a yellow banner, red letter message here on your site about a meditation that you're trying to do that is going to be continuing on until January 13th at 7 p.m. Whatever time zone that is. I'm sure that with what happened this past Wednesday at the Capitol, you probably wish that you would have done that meditation at a different time than 7 p.m. Eastern, if that's what it was, seeing all the hell that broke loose there. So this meditation.
Well, this is very interesting because we, and I say we because I work with a lot of people who are on my Ascension Institute group, a group that get a year long worth of training. And we were guided in meditation to do this meditation every Wednesday at 7 p.m. And this started back in December. And the meditation is called the Golden Time. It is still available on my website. People can, if this recording is after February 1st, then they'll have to buy it. But as of right now, that is available for free for people. And it is a very powerful meditation because we literally go into the zone of the great golden age and we see everything worked out. We don't know how. We don't look for how. We look for the after event, the event that shows us that it all worked out. It's very wonderful, very powerful, and anybody can buy it. It's like $9.99. It's very inexpensive. And it's very incredible. So we've been doing it every Wednesday for quite a while. And I do it every day. Sometimes I do it twice a day. And it's so interesting that you bring up, what happened. I got a very clear message not to follow the news that week and to fast and double up on my meditations, which I did. So I was not plugged into that information for quite a while.
All right, and if you want to stop this on January 13th, fine. But 7 days later, it looks like our president is going to be some demented douchebag who's so lost it he doesn't even know what secret societies he's part of. So you want that guy in the White House? I don't think so. You want to make things right. Wouldn't you want to keep these meditations going just so him and his controllers, puppeteers, if you will, don't like turn the tide in their favor after this month, or are you just going to stick with January 13th and forget I just said that as a suggestion?
Well, I don't take sides on political issues, but I will say that I also have a guided meditation that we do a lot, which is called Divine Government. And it is not polarized, it simply calls in the divine essence of every leader at every level in every country, every nation, and asks Source and Spirit to infuse those people with more of God's energy so that they can make the best decisions that's possible. So we're praying for everybody. And the same is true with Golden Time. We're not taking sides here. We're asking for everything to work out. So it doesn't really matter. To me, it doesn't really matter.
Okay, well, if you really want to follow that philosophy of love everybody, no matter what, no exceptions, it may be a little hard to get the love to go into Joe Biden's consciousness, considering that there are several images of his eyes turning black as though he's under archon demonic possession. But okay, I've said too much. Let's move on to some other subjects here. Well, actually, on a related note, your name, Saint Germain, that entity, angel, whatever you want to refer to him, her, it, whatever it is, these are higher level consciousness entities. We probably shouldn't even envision them as humans because that's probably not what they look like anyway, if they could be said to look like anything. But Saint Germain was said to have played a role in the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Um, do you know anything about that? Did the founding fathers really get influenced by some entity in the room that was Saint Germain?
Well, most people, including me, refer to entities in the negative sense. So I would say at the Ascended Master Saint Germain very likely was there in the room influencing people. And I have a big affection for this Ascended Master. He has given me a lot of guidance and teachings. I also work with Archangel Michael and other Ascended Masters. So even though you are correct using that term, entity, because so many people think of entities as bad or dark, I prefer to just use the label the Ascended Master.
Fair enough. Also, another thing. Well, actually, before I get into that, you, out of curiosity, haven't really. You said you work with Archangel Michael at some spiritual session that I was at a local metaphysical center. Lady there said that she actually saw Archangel Michael going nuts over me more than she's ever seen him go nuts over everybody. So if you work with him, I can't help but wonder if you sensed him, considering that, among other things, I do actually ask my angels and guides to guide me and protect me and my guests on these shows before I do them all the time. And if Archangel Michael wants to go nuts over me to influence me in
Okay, but what does that mean? What does going nuts over you mean? Like in a good way or a bad
a
way?
good way, of course. I mean, he's not going to make things take a turn for the worse, I would think, if I
I'm
really
just
wanted.
trying to get clarity here. That going nuts business can be used either way. So I wanted to
Okay,
make sure I understood you.
it was just very prominent. Maybe Archangel Michael's prominence over me was greater than almost anybody she's ever seen, she claimed. So,
Aha. Well,
you,
here's the thing. Archangel Michael's presence is unmistakable. So if that guide or spiritual person saw Archangel Michael around you or over you or near you, it's probably true because even Edgar Casey occasionally channeled Archangel Michael, and Michael came through in such a way that everyone in the room always felt an overwhelming energy. Dishes could be heard rattling in the kitchen and everything. So if she said that you had this overwhelming presence of Archangel Michael, it means what you're asking for is coming through. And good on you. Keep it up.
Of course, and I guess the reason Michael is such a extremely popular name nowadays and has been for a while among boys, it comes from a Hebrew name that means he who is like God. And I'm
That is
sure a
true.
lot of parents want their people to think that their kid is like God. So why not use a name that works? Okay,
I
but
agree.
anyhow, my middle name is Michael, but that's not because of the angel. That's because that was my uncle's first name. But anyhow, moving on here, getting back to Saint Germain. Another thing about Saint Germain, very controversial subject. A lot of people are probably going to do face palms and go, "Oh no, not this road. We've been down this road again." And I've been having the same thoughts about this subject. I am, of course, talking about Nasara Jasara RV Global Currency Reset. Now, this has been going on for a long time. This whole global currency reset might happen next Tuesday is starting to get really damn annoying. And so, like, oh my God, could you just release the gold backed currency already? Why do you have to keep talking about it happening for years and then force us to wait longer and longer? And they always give excuses like, well, the banks are resisting more than we expected. And I'm not really buying that. I think you're just using an excuse to show how maybe you're slacking a little too much in getting our financial system straight. So, I mean, the idea that this is actually supposed to happen, I mean, if you expect that Earth is going to ascend to 5D level, then you would have to expect that everything that prevents that, including the bankers loaning us money that doesn't exist and charging us interest on it, which makes debt and inflation unavoidable, which means a perpetual ball and chain around our consciousness awakening. If we are going to get into 5D at some point, that ball and chain has to be severed, and you would have to think that, well, okay, someday we're going to transition to no money at all, but you can't possibly transition to no money at all if you keep letting fractional reserve banking happen. So as a stepping stone to eventually transitioning no money at all, we would probably have to change our financial system in a way that would eventually accommodate that. And of course, going to a gold standard where with no usury, no charging of interest on loans, and no corruption on Wall Street either, and genuinely using this financial system like there isn't more money out there than there is gold available. That is the perfect thing that we need as a stepping stone to maybe a couple decades down the line after that, transitioning to no money. But Saint Germain does seem to be
Darn,
a prominent
you
name in
just said
this.
what I was going to say.
Yes. Okay. So
the
what does Saint Germain have
only
to?
thing, the only thing I would say is, I don't know that I could add anything to what you said. I thought what you said was perfect.
Well, how does Saint Germain play a role in that? Because his
I
name
have
seems to
no
come
idea.
up in regards to that.
I don't know the answer
Like
to that
Saint
one.
Germain Trust or something.
Yeah, but
Okay.
see, those are just names that people use to evoke the idea because Saint Germain is known as this ascended master who can transmute your karma through your devotion to him, and that his energy of the violet flame will transmute your obligations or your debts, and we're talking, action debts that will hold you back. And I have a strong belief that that is so, that the work we do with Saint Germain does produce results. So, but as far as the Saint Germain Trust, I mean that's just the name somebody chose. It doesn't mean Saint Germain's behind it. He could be, but I don't know the answer. And I think all the things you said are really, uh, I truly try to walk the middle way and don't get too political. You're a little more political than me, and that's cool. But I don't want to cross that line. So what you said was brilliant, and I don't have anything additional to add.
Okay. I didn't know me going off into rants could sound so intelligent, but thank you for that compliment there. And you call yourself the practical mystic. Seems a little counterintuitive that something that's mystical could be practical, but there's a lot of down to earth mysteries out in the world. I used to read the Hardy Boys books a lot. Those are down to earth mysteries. So, I
Well,
mean,
first of all, I was given that name. I did
okay.
not pick it for myself. I simply allowed it to be assigned to me and then used it because I was labeled that in a book called Famous Wisconsin Mystics. And they refer to me as the practical mystic in that book. And the reason they do is because everything I did to start with and still do is information that helps a person live their daily life and get better results than they can without these tools and without these helps. You know, when I learned how to connect with my higher self and created a mechanism for people to step into this place where they could check in with their higher self and know for certain the answer to a dilemma that they're facing. Is it my highest and best good to do this? Is it my highest and best good to do this? When you have that as a resource, it makes your life so much easier. There are times that when my kids were younger and there was drama going on, I would ask my higher self, you know, is it my highest and best good to do this? No. Is it my highest and best good to do this? Yes. And so that's very powerful because, you know, as I don't know if you have kids, but I raised 4 sons and by myself, and I can tell you from experience that there are plenty of times that something happens that you don't know what to do because there's choice on the table and you really want to make the best decision, and that's one way you do it. So the higher self connection is a very powerful tool, and it's very easily learned in 6 weeks, and everybody who learns it writes me thank you notes. So what I can tell you is it's very logical, it's very left brain. It's very step by step. Do these things and boom, you're done. And it's only 3 things, you know, it's super easy. So, you know, it's like, well, why not do it, you know?
Yes, why not do it? And just do it. Some people say just do it. In this day and age, you have to just do it. Well, okay. You mentioned karma and karmic debt and all that a couple minutes ago. I want to get back to that for a moment. Um, Now, I've come to the realization, well, the idea anyway, that credit cards are God's way of seeing how well humans can manage their karma. I came to that realization after I got a trust fund check several years ago for about $16,000 for some farm rural property in Massachusetts that was part of my father's side of the family. And I used those $16 to pay off all my credit card bills, and what was left over, a little bit that was left over, I used to buy gold and silver. Shortly after I pressed all the pay bill buttons on my credit card, the credit card websites using after my money was, I knew it was on the bank and I could do that. Shortly after pressing the pay bill buttons, I got the worst headache I ever got in my life, and it took forever to go away. And a few days after that, I had a few synchronicities happen in my life, suggesting the idea of karma going to the head of all things, and which led me to believe, and also after hearing a Native American, Garrett Duncan, point out that when I talked about this, that from a spiritual side of my father's side of the family, this was a karma resolution method, generational karma resolution, with my family siblings and I getting a check in the form of a farm property trust. Um, but this idea of paying off credit card debt being a great way to resolve karma also raises another question. Um, Something that I used to joke about on this show before, but now all of a sudden I think it's a bad idea and I'm retracting it. Let's assume for a moment, okay, wishful thinking maybe, but the global currency reset and Nasara RV reset thing does happen. We do go to gold back currency. Now, let's say hypothetically you knew the date that was going to happen when we officially go to gold back currency. Let's say that after you know what that date is, you flat out max out all your credit cards to buy as much gold and silver as you possibly could with those credit cards. And then when the global currency reset happens, there's a major debt jubilee, which means all your credit card debt is wiped out and you get to keep all that gold and silver that you used to buy with the credit cards. And you never have to pay them back because the debt jubilee wiped everything out. Now, it sounds comical in practice. Some would say it sounds comical. Some would say it's a brilliant idea. In fact, I brought that to everybody's attention at a conference. Maybe should we do this? And everybody erupted into thunderous applause after I said that. But I have since come to realize that would actually be a very stupid idea, because by paying all that money on your credit card, which you have no intention of ever paying back, you will actually generate massive amount of karma for yourself. And the debt jubilee that wipes out your credit card debt might look nice, but you still keep all the karma that you generated from paying all that money. On the other hand, if you pay off all your credit card bills, you do one of the best things you possibly can to resolve karma. So,
I think your last statement is probably the most profound. First of all, I now teach that there is no more karma. And it doesn't mean that today you can go do something that you know is wrong and not have something come back in your face to keep you from something that you wanted. So I like your analogy very much. But what I will say to you is a person can decide there is no more karma and step into 5D where no one is keeping score. And it reminds me of a very powerful channeled message that came through from Sana Kumara, who said, the game is over, referring to the polarity 3D game, including karma, okay? The game is over. It will end when there are no more players. Will you be the first to leave or the last? So the input here is to encourage people to step up, and if they can, pay off their debt like you're suggesting, and not, what you just said about people buying gold with their credit card, I've never heard of such a thing. I didn't even know that was possible. So you're really catching me by surprise on that one. But if you choose to buy gold because you want to, make sure you're secure and you think that that's a solid investment, then that's what a person does. But as far as karma is concerned, what Sana Kumara was teaching is that once you step into your power and a place of unconditional love and balance, it's very solid. It's unlikely that you're going to do something that you know is wrong.
yes, and well, doing something that you know is wrong, generating karma for you, raises another question that kind of makes you wonder, well, does it really have to take as long as it's taking? Well, the thing that's taking so long being the end, the official true end of the system of domination and control that's still affecting our lives, and being able to so we can go to fifth dimension and all when it's
The
gone
answer is
much
yes.
fast. Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, yes, but I wasn't quite done yet. I wanted to ask how what the bad guys who are trying to resist losing the battle of good versus evil, the evil forces, they're obviously going to offer resistance. Common sense and logic would tell you that because they're making things hard for humanity and doing bad things when they offer resistance, they're generating bad karma for themselves. So at some point, the straw has to break the camel's back, and the forces of nature have to decide, okay, you've generated so much bad karma because of this resistance to try to prevent yourself from losing. You can't resist anymore, so you are officially defeated now, and then something would have to happen that would
Okay,
allow for
there's
humanity.
two answers. Number one, does it have to take this long? And the answer is yes. And number two, the second part is those who turn towards God, always, our source, always have a chance to redeem themselves in the next lifetime. And that's what you want to count on. You don't want to keep score on other people. People come to me all the time and they say, well, if there's no more karma, what about the thief? What about this? What about that? And my response is, that's not your job to worry about. Your job is to make sure you are not creating any kind of residue of things you know better. It's one thing to do something innocently. And, for example, when my kids were little, when something happened and somebody got hurt, and clearly somebody did something that caused that hurt, maybe on purpose, maybe by accident, their first response they were taught to give is, are you okay? Not, I'm sorry. Because I'm sorry makes you better than me. If I say I'm sorry to you, I've made myself beneath you. But if I say, are you okay? I'm your peer checking up on you and helping you. So the whole bottom line in all this is we have to, we're living in two worlds, okay? think of it that way. I actually talk about 3 worlds in my books. So there's 2 worlds. One world is where all this chaos is going on, and another is where we are actually building the 3D world right around us. And when we finally let go of the chaos version, it's going away, and we're going to end up with a world that is truly manageable, and it'll be beautiful for everyone. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take probably another 20 years.
Well, the fall of the Roman Empire, the modern era that is America, is said astrologically to going to be happening around April 8th, 2024, when we have that solar eclipse that's going to crisscross the country in the opposite path of the one that happened in August 2017. And the crisscross point of those 2 eclipses is in Carbondale, Illinois. Now, when you hear that, fall of the Roman Empire, the modern era that is America, if you're an American and you hear that and you have every reason to believe that's going to happen, is it like a lot of people may hear that as, oh my God, let's free the country. This country is going to become the ultimate banana republic, go from riches to rags over the next 4 years. Let's get the hell out of here. While others say, no, I expect a much more smooth transition. The fall is going to be a little rough, but it's not going to like transform America into a banana republic. It's going to be it's going to be a nice country, but not an empire anymore in 2024. We don't know what happened. This future is always in motion. But when you hear that idea that around that date, and that also coincides around the end of the Pluto and Capricorn cycle, by the way. Pluto and Capricorn is supposed to signal the fall of anything that's not in humanity's best interest. The Roman Empire of the modern era is obviously not in humanity's best interest as long as it exists. So, okay, make of that whatever you will. Do you see that as the future being positive or kind of hard for America in the next 4 years or so?
I only see positive.
How is the empire going to fall if it's going to be positive? Or how can it fall?
Maybe the astrologers are wrong. Remember, astrology is just a template. It's not the ruling force. It's not a predictor. It is a template that we use to predict, but it is not the predictor. It doesn't control it. It's like saying you have the TV controller, but you don't control the TV unless I let you have batteries in that thing. So the actual system of astrology is an overlay on top of humanity. And as humanity evolves, they will find their way through it. So fall could also mean breakthrough to another way of being, another way that hasn't been invented yet, for example.
Nice way of looking at it there. Now, on your description here on your website, I believe I saw something that actually said essential oils channeled by Mary Magdalene. Well, wait a minute. Well, how do you channel an essential oil? Why would Mary Magdalene, of all people,
well, Mary Magdalene was a master aromatherapist. A lot of people don't know that. So we'll start with that. And one of my team members was an aromatherapist. And in the Dreamtime, Mary Magdalene gave her these formulas. And they came through one at a time. And there's 24 of them. And they're very, very powerful. We've actually had scientific testing done, and they're head and shoulders above everything out there. And I didn't know that until recently because I never thought to do scientific testing. It was another business partner that said we need to do testing, and they did DNA testing, and they also did microscopy, and they clearly showed the difference between various improvements, like good healers, other oils, the best healers, and then the blends. And so what I know is that I've known this all along. I've had these blends for over 11 years. And I've had some amazing experience. One of the sweetest, funniest, oddball experiences I know of is when a client was told in a reading to get a certain blend. And I'm very reluctant to push something on people unless they're really supposed to have it. And I resisted even telling the client that the record keepers were saying this because I don't like it when, you get in someone's office and they want to sell you more stuff. So I was a little bit reluctant to tell her, but I finally did. And then later when the session was over, I said, I happen to have that oil if you want to get it. And she says, well, I'm not even sure I believe in oils. And I said, well, that's okay with me. I'm not trying to sell it to you. I just want to, we have it if you want it. And this woman was an attorney. And she said, well, in that case, I'm going to get it. So she gets it. She gets on a city bus in Manhattan. And she decides to open the bottle on the bus. She uses the oil, puts a little bit on her hand and rubs it together and inhales it. And the guy sitting on the bus in front of her turned around, pointed his finger to her, and looked her in the eye and said, thank you. I don't know what you just did, but I know it came from you.
Wow, interesting story. And now I sensed you wanted to maybe downplay the sales thing, but if you want to make a little bit of a sales pitch out of this, I might as well give you the chance now regarding these blends of essential oils on your site. And it looks like, judging from the names, these are not your run-of-the-mill oils. You've given them, they have like unique formulas, and you've even changed the names of them. I see there's a table down at on the page here. One that's kind of jumping out at me is
What happened is I went to the altar and asked Mary Magdalene if it was appropriate to try and take the oils bigger. I have sold quite a bit over the 11 years, but I felt like I wasn't doing it justice. I felt like I wasn't giving it enough attention, and I didn't know how to raise the visibility. And I said to Mary Magdalene in my prayer, I will take marketing advice. I will take on a marketing manager, but the money has to come with it. I will let go of the oils and let another company run with it. Whatever you put in front of me, I will do if it's in our highest and best good with these blends. And 6 weeks later, I met the president of a company called Vibrance, and all kinds of things happened in a very fast, domino-like way that showed both the president of the company and me that we were to give them use of the formulas and to promote them. So they rebranded them so they could find names that were less tied to a person's spirituality. The original names were all tied to my work and my books and my training courses. And because of that, to make it more universal, the names were changed slightly on some of the blends to help that be more palatable to people who might be interested in the product. And they are blends. So the initial ones were so powerful that they were too strong. And so we had to put them with high level coconut oil. And then in this generation of the new names and the new branding, we went back to the altar and checked, and we both got, the president got and I got from guidance, we could go with full strength. So that's what we did. So they're slightly different. They're a little stronger.
Thank you.
Oh, and you know what? I want to say one other thing, and that is, what is the purpose of the oils? And they clear emotional wounds, and they help a person step into their power faster than they can do on their own. And what kind of wounds do they clear? They clear anger, resentment, they clear jealousy, they clear being a victim, they clear being heartsick, shame, longing, and so on. So they're very powerful to help people shift out of their stuck place.
Well, it's funny you mention using things to shift out of your stuck place. Well, as far as essential oils go, the only 3 essential oils that I have are clary sage, which is the best essential oil for the tiger sign in the Chinese zodiac. I also use lavender because, well, the horoscopes actually said that's one that I should work with given my signs and status. And there's this oil, I don't actually know the name. It's like Yang Long or something like that that I use during full moon and waning crescent rituals specifically. But I don't really believe in using essential oils as my secret weapon to clear negativity and weak links that I may have. My secret weapon of choice seems to be this subliminal flashing thing from mind movies that flashes little subliminal messages on your computer screen that you can't read with the naked eye. And there are so many different things to choose from the table, like to clear worry and stress, to help your sleep, to be physically fit, think like a genius, improve IQ. I could go on and on and on with the things that the subliminal messages are said to improve. Now, history shows that there is something to this. The movie industry and the Coca-Cola company would flash Coca-Cola symbols during the days that movies had intermissions, right before the movie intermission on the screen, and then during intermission, at a rate never before seen, people were buying Coca-Cola products. If you think that's a coincidence, I got some lovely ocean
They
properties
also passed a law against that
because it works. Okay, but
because it's abuse of power and it's a misuse of what people came for. They came for the movie, not for the advertisement.
right, but the thing that I'm using from mindmovies.com, no abuse of power there. That's purely trying to help someone with the flashing
No,
of.
the difference is you know what you're buying. You are
Okay.
informed as you buy your ticket or entry to that. The difference is the people at the movies didn't know what they were getting into because it was not spoken of, and that's why it was outlawed.
So the subliminal messages that I'm seeing, they did the little thing, the app or whatever that allows me to do this in Mind Movies, sold that does the subliminal thing. It does have the option of you to read over the list of the subliminal messages that will flash at you um, after you click which ones you want to use. But I would have to think that this is all subliminal, whether or not I know what's being flashed at me, whether I read the messages before they start getting flashed at me at a rate that's too fast to read with the naked eye.
Okay, wait a minute. Wait a minute. First of all, I want to tell you that I totally get it. I believe that subliminal messages work, and certainly it's a known fact. It's a scientific fact. I can also tell you that when they first came out, and there was an episode on 60 Minutes when I was probably 9 years old or 10 years old, and they did the same thing, the subliminal messages on the tube to see if people could see it. And out of 6 or 7 people in the room watching the TV show, I was the only one who saw it and knew what it was. Now, the reason I bring that up is because it's important for a person to decide at the ego level, at the free will level, what they will allow into their field. So the reason they let you know what it is that's there is because they are inviting you to use your free will to accept it. Now, when you just buy it and use it because you know it's good and you know it works, that's useful, but you are abdicating your free will by not looking at it.
Okay, that's an interesting way of looking at it.
I like what you're telling me. I like the idea, and I know about those guys, and I know about the subliminal messages. You can also do it with sound, and I do it in a number of my CDs. But I tell people what I'm doing, and I play it out loud first before it goes subliminal. So what I'm saying here is participation in these things is more powerful and useful if you know what you're looking at or you know what you're being shown, because you have now involved your free will and you go, yeah, this is really great stuff. Now, here's the problem with abdicating your free will. Every time we pass off our free will to someone else, or we say, I have to, or, I'm required to, we give up a piece of our free will. So when you buy this, the optimal is to choose to look at it just as a check in with your own wisdom. Yeah, this is a match for me. And then play the subliminal and never look at it again, which would be totally fine. So, my point here is that when we give away our power, we lose a piece of our free will. We lose a bit of our sovereignty, which is what your original question was based on.
Yes, thank you for pointing all that out. And boy, where to go? There's subjects here, and we still have about 15 minutes to go. Well, as far as the events and classes that you offer, how there's Akashic Records workshop you have, Sacred Journeys, and also the Ascension Institute. Now, in the Ascension Institute, I got to ask you, are you doing whatever you can to refrain from the Ascension deception, which is essentially the idea that at some point while we're living on this earth, we are going to transform into high crystalline bodies that, well, for all intents and purposes, can burp butterflies and fart rainbows and can reproduce without sex and not get hungry by not eating because we can feed ourselves in other ways. No, 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 no. That's not why we were put on this earth to ever experience that. That's not how it works.
That's so interesting. I have never heard that description. I've never heard the word ascension deception, and I've never heard all those things that you're supposed to be able to do
Well,
when
let me interrupt you for a moment before you give me the chance here. The first person I heard about that term from was George Kavasilis, who's probably my second most popular source of info on this show. Um, he he actually, well, I guess the reason he knows about the Ascension deception is because he fell for it before 2012 Mayan calendar end date. For a while he was actually saying, first of all, the precession of the equinox 26,000 year cycle didn't end on the Mayan calendar end date. He claims that it's precession of the equinoxes. It's got to be an equinox, not a solstice. He said it was actually March 2013 when it ended, and he also claimed that December 21st 2012 the earth would rise up on its axis and it would blossom. I mean, we die through this, but he says it's a good death because we all get to ascend into higher forms, and you're all going to love this when it ends. And 2013 March, the equinox in 2013 would be when all that happens. That
well, we'll
started
see.
ends.
We will see how we do, how
He was
you and
wrong.
I do, and where I fit in your continuum of popular people. What I will tell you is the way I teach ascension is that we are becoming evolved beings, and that you and I are becoming the ascended master you, the ascended master me. And that means that we're not going to die, and we're going to be more powerful and more perfect than we can imagine. That's all I would say about that.
Thank you. Well, and we'll leave it at that then. So, okay, these Akashic Records workshops, I take it it's basically pay me X amount of dollars to spend X amount of minutes with me to answer X amount of questions that I can answer using the Akashic Records. Is that basically how this works, or is there a lot more to it than that?
In the Akashic Records workshops, I teach people how to open their own records and how to open the records for others.
Okay, and I mean, people generally would have to pay to get the whole idea there, but some people are going to make the assertion that the Akashic Record, being able to read them, I mean, well, it's kind of like remote viewing in the sense that you can learn it, but some people are designed to be better at it than others. Andrew Bartzis didn't even know he had the ability to do it until he was at a minor league baseball game, and then when the game-winning home run was hit, he downloaded in one instant the Akashic Records of everybody in the stands. It must have been an overload. People tell him, and he says, "Well, yeah, of course it was, but that's what happened, and it happened spontaneously to him. Nobody had to teach him that; it just happened." And
I agree. I think it's possible for a person to learn to open the Akashic Records without going into a class. I'm not suggesting that my way is the only way. I'm suggesting that I'm an amazing teacher who's been invited all over the world to teach this work because my reputation is so high, not because I went out and looked for it. I never once asked someone to host me. I have always been invited to come and teach. And that means that the teaching that I give on the Akashic Records and how to open the Akashic Records is useful to people. And I totally agree with you that there are people who open or access the Akashic Records without any method, without any training. And good on them. I have no objection to that. I think that's entirely possible.
oh yes, if you're infinite consciousness, then of course it's possible. But when you're talking about realizing that you're infinite consciousness and everything's possible, um, it does raise the question of what is it that the superhumans have that the non-superhumans don't have regarding why they can do the things they do. Like Sai Baba, he was able to do great things, and what was it about him that made him able to do it? Was it a closer connection to source, or was it is it simple as you can give a biological explanation by saying that certain parts of his DNA were active that allowed him to do it more so than others?
Well, I think you may be onto something to say that maybe parts of his DNA were more active than others, than the rest of us, let's say. But I also feel very strongly that the spiritual connection is what opens up the recognition that we are phenomenal beings and we haven't begun to use all of our faculties and all of our capabilities. And the more we get out of our own way and the more we have the abilities and the knowledge and the resources to do that, the quicker it will come. It seems to me that looking at those masters is inspiration. You know, what they do, we should be able to do as well. And when we become ascended masters, we will.
Of course, of course. And there's a lot of ascended masters on this earth that don't even know that they're ascended masters. Andrew Barsis once said that. Just thought
I
I
think
was.
that's true. I think that's very true. And I think this is even funnier. I think that there are a lot of ascended masters in embodiment. We've been told this in the records many times that a child is an ascended master. And I say this quite sincerely, but I think it's very funny. I feel sorry for the mother of the child that's an ascended master, because if they're really an ascended master, they're going to be a huge amount of trouble for that parent to raise, because they don't need childhood. Childhood is just let's see how far I can go on the limits, because they're always going to be okay, and they're always going to pull themselves out of whatever drama they put themselves into. And so the parents, instead of trying to parent your kids the way you parent the other kids, or way your friends are parenting, you have to find new ways to be a parent, because it's true. Those ascended masters just have their own way of being, and why are they here? That's one of the big questions I started asking. And what the conclusion I got, and this is kind of an interesting way to look at the future that's different from the way you look at it, but simply aligns with what you've been saying. And that is, if there are so many ascended masters in embodiment, and I believe there are, that must mean that we're going to make it. So whatever the drama that we have to go through to get there, it doesn't matter, because it's a fait accompli. We will get there. We're either going to get there the short way or the long way, but we're going there. We're on our way. And those little beings wouldn't have come in if we weren't close. They wouldn't risk it.
Right. So thank you very much for. Yeah, I really don't have anything else to say other than right or thank you. Whatever is will is, and fair enough, and all those cliches that radio hosts talk about or say. So, well, I haven't quite reached 2 hours, but maybe this might be a good part to end it. Before I do, though, I would like to give you the opportunity to get out anything you'd like to get out regarding future of your appearances, future of your work, and all most importantly, well, not downplaying you or anything, but on a global level, everything may be more important than any one person. One person can't change the world, even though one person plays a huge part. But what did you
Well,
see on a global
I
scale?
think you have a lot of wisdom that flows through you, and it's been a real pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.
And even if people see adversarial comments or adversarial interaction, it's only to dig deep and go down the rabbit hole and find our way out of it. My closing message is that you can reach me through my website, MaureenSt.com, and that everything on my website, I always have something free on my blog post. I always give out a free meditation every month, so you can find good stuff there and get a trial for what my work might be like for you. I also write a lot of wisdom in my blog posts. So if you're interested in learning more about the things that I know about, you can read the blog posts. And finally, I'd like to close with a very special prayer. And the prayer is said by an individual, and it goes like this: I'm asking for a day of heaven on earth for me and everyone I come in contact with. And I want to tell you a little story that goes with it. And the little story is one of my students said to me, we were going to have a family reunion. We're all going to share a house together. And we were all adult siblings with our families. And we were going to rent this big house and have a nice family reunion. But my sister was always the drama queen. And she always caused a scene. And we really wanted her there so that we could have everyone there for family. But at the same time, we, struggled with that because she was the drama queen. So I started asking for a week of heaven on earth for me and my family and for the family reunion. So instead of asking for a day of heaven on earth, she actually asked for a week of heaven on earth. And she said it was the coolest thing. The day before we were all to meet, she calls up and says, I'm not coming. I'm checking myself into a detox facility. Now, that couldn't have been better news because it means they could have a good time without her. They could have a good time without worrying about her. And they could have a good time knowing she was taking something very positive for herself. And then the woman said, and we had the best time. So the simple prayer is, I'm asking for a day of heaven on earth for me and everyone I come in contact with. And then you can name a time frame if you're going on a vacation or something special. It's very, very powerful.
Thank you very much for that prayer and the words of wisdom and everything else. I guess I might as well subscribe to your YouTube channel. Do you upload it often, or have you trailed away from your channel in recent times?
The past few months, my staff has not uploaded stuff, and we just had a conversation about it. So you're going to start seeing a lot more there. So it'd be great if you signed up for it.
Awesome, awesome. Glad to hear that. So take care. Namaste. Good luck. Enjoy 2021. Enjoy the year of the ox when you ever still in the year of the metal rat. But the year of the ox next month, and we talked about a lot of Chinese stuff. I had to throw that out. So
it's totally cool. Thank you.
So take care now. Best of luck to you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.